Well, welcome to the fourth episode of the Nick Johnson Show. My name is Nick Johnson. I am your host. You can find me at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nick Johnson CT. Also, YouTube, The Nick Johnson Show for the video experience, and SoundCloud.com, The Nick Johnson Podcast for the audio experience. Today is July 20th, 2017. And as you could tell by the intro, we are celebrating, talking, and remembering about the life of Chester Bennington, one of the frontmans of one of my favorite bands growing up, Linkin Park. This is really an impromptu podcast. Obviously this just happened today. I had other things planned, but I really think this was a great time, but an unfortunate time, but a good opportunity to deliver a message to you that I probably wouldn't have otherwise talked about. Just a little bit about his life. Obviously we all know he was one of our favorite singers from Linkin Park. He was born March 20th, 1976, actually a day after my birthday. Pretty cool. And was in Linkin Park from 1999 until, today, and worked in a couple other bands as well, and he, really came to prominence after Linkin Park debuted their album Hybrid Theory in 2000, which was really when we all got to know him. In the end, a lot of great songs off that album that I still know word for word to this day. That song that I just played, and I'm playing that at the risk of probably getting in trouble because I really don't have the license nor the ability to play that song, but that comes off of the Reanimation album. That was really one of the like an album that inspired me to become like a wannabe DJ. I'll never forget this. Like, I dragged my mom out to Guitar Center. Actually, I think it was Daddy's Junkie Music if you're an Orange or Milford or New Haven native. And I took money out of my savings account that I had saved up for my birthdays and went and got the sickest mix setup. So I got a Newmark, like the original vinyl turntables with the mixer in the center. Like, I was trying to be the DJ from Linkin Park, and this really inspired my whole musical aspect of me, and it really influenced me to start playing guitar, which I don't nearly play as much as I would like to. But this band was my band, and if you follow me, you're friends with me on Facebook. I posted a little, just very small, memoir for him. His music really helped me get through some difficult times in my childhood, and I realized a couple things today, and I'm not trying to add humor where it shouldn't be added, but I realized today that Chester was 41 years old, and made me realize I'm getting a little bit older too. He was probably my age, probably 25, 26 when I was listening to his music when I was 10 years old, 9 years old. So there you go. I mean, but another thing that I really realized is how much depression really affects us. And I don't say that from an outside looking in kind of perspective. I say that admittedly as somebody on the inside speaking about it. And, really isn't something that I would otherwise talk about. And, I try to keep this podcast to be political and current events. And, this is a current event, I suppose. But I try not to dive, I talk about myself here and there, but I really try not to keep this about me. I want to make it something for you. But I do think that you could actually take something away from this. And, I had mentioned this was somebody that I listened to as a young kid, really, and it had helped me get through, difficult times. And, I know I say that in reference to myself as a fifth grader. I was, probably 9 or 10 years old, and without, at the risk of sounding a little pretentious here, I think at that age I probably went through a lot of things, had already gone through a lot of things that hopefully most people don't deal with in their entire life. And I say that obviously with a sense of pride, as well as an understanding of how things have impacted me and how things can impact others. And to get real personal here, I haven't had, I didn't have the best childhood. I had a pretty unsettled childhood, and obviously many have had it worse, and I understand that. But my first memory was that my parents were getting divorced. That was my very first memory, that I was being told that my parents were getting divorced. And that was a real time to become conscious, I guess, and and have reality really hit you. And as unfortunate as that experience was, and as it is to look back at that memory, I did learn a lot. There's ups and downs in life. There's failure involved, and accountability involved, and things of that nature. But and what I'm about to say now, I'm not saying from a woe is me kind of perspective. I'm really thinking at the end of this, you might be able to take something away. So I'm giving you a little bit of me in hopes to give you a little bit of something. But so what I'm about to say, this is going to sound depressing, but I can't remember looking back now, living any other way. I always remember being sad. I always remember being depressed. And my first memory of parents getting divorced, not a good thing to hear. But the moments that I found that I've really lived in my life, that I've actually felt like I've lived or experienced good things, were somewhere between the high. In all honesty, whether it's self-induced or whether it was just excitement, of something that may or may not happen. The moments that I felt like I lived and had a good time were somewhere in between the highs, the expectations, and the very lows, the disappointment. So once I finally was able to find a balance between not having too high of an expectation without having too low of an expectation, that I was able to find a little bit of happiness. And that's something that I carried with me as a life lesson. But in that same respect, I learned that there was highs and very severe lows. And I think subconsciously at that age as a child, I kind of forced myself to adjust to that lifestyle, as an adolescent. And I think I probably developed that as a coping mechanism, that I needed to find a way to make the abnormal and unsettled childhood that I was enduring feel normal. And I know eventually it grew into something much uglier. And it followed me into my teen and early adult years like a stray dog that was begging to be fed. And what I mean by that analogy is that it was this thing that existed within me that I thought something bad was always going to happen. And what I started to do and what I recognized was that I was thinking to myself, something bad was going to happen anyway, right? No matter what. So I acted accordingly. If the natural course of events didn't lead to a new low on its own, then I would create it for myself. I would get myself into trouble. I would find myself in some type of situation that created a familiar feeling of reaching a low or being depressed. And what I, eventually reached at a younger age as I got out of my adolescent years and through my early teens and into my teens and reached young adult, I really found myself in a situation where I had really reached rock bottom. And something that I learned from being there and being in rock bottom, and it's not, I say this again, these things happen often, there's ups and downs of life. So sometimes you find yourself, feeling down and low, and rock bottom is a very specific place. For each one of us, it's different. But throughout the years, as I started to look back on these experiences and these feelings, I started, I worked in construction, right? So I'm still working as a plumber, and I started to use a reference to a ladder coming out of rock bottom. And what I started to think to myself was that, when you're in rock bottom, there's the only way to get out there is to climb. The only way is to find a way out, to climb out. And I refer to that as a ladder, right? So you're going to climb up using the ladder. And if you have a fear of heights, you'll completely understand this analogy. So you feel yourself starting to use that ladder to climb out of rock bottom. And with each rung that you go up, you start to feel a little scared. You start to feel nervous. You start to feel yourself reaching a new high. But when you become accustomed to feeling that rock bottom feeling, you tend to find comfort there. As depressing and as miserable as it is there, it becomes what you're familiar with. So as you start to sometimes pull yourself out of rock bottom and reach a new high, reach a new point in your life, you clam up. And sometimes you want to jump off the ladder from where you are and just jump back down to what you know, and you end up right back in rock bottom. And sometimes that's very much self-inflicted. And you start to think that that's where you're comfortable, and that's where you belong, and that's where you're supposed to be, and rock bottom begins to feel like home. And something that I learned throughout these years is that it's a hell of a lot easier to be at the rock bottom. Rock bottom doesn't require any action from you or from me. It doesn't require any responsibilities. It simply requires that you just wallow in self-pity a lot of the time. And it doesn't, being in rock bottom, when you stay there, it doesn't require any proactive steps towards positive change. When you're there, you simply blame the situation. You blame the ladder for not being stable, for not being comfortable, for not being secure enough for you to find a way out. You say things like, I don't like this ladder. I don't like this way of helping myself. Maybe if I had a different ladder or a different situation, I could climb out of here. I could get out of here. And what I've come to realize very much so is that we only have one ladder. We only have one life to live. And it could be as long and miserable as you want it to be, or as short and beautiful as you want it to be. And, sometimes we don't have the best circumstances. And sometimes we don't have the best ladder to use to climb out of. And it might not feel like it's on the most sturdy foundation. But you've really only got one choice if you want to make it out of rock bottom, and that's keep climbing. As difficult as that may feel, as uncomfortable as it may feel, it's the only way to keep moving forward. So I say this from an understanding that it's not easy to take that first step onto that ladder. And sometimes that first step is just reaching out and talking to someone you know, or someone you're friendly with, you're comfortable with, that you know has experienced something similar, and reaching out to them and letting them know what's going on. That's the first step up the ladder. And where you go from there is completely dependent on your situation. It changes accordingly. But the most important thing you can do is, if you're dealing with depression, or if you know someone that's dealing with depression, is reach out to them, or reach out to someone. If you're the one suffering, you don't need to suffer in silence. This is real. Depression is a very real thing. It's impacted my life. It's impacted many of my relationships continuously. It's impacted many people that I know, many people close to me. It has devastating effects, and it could change someone else's life too. So I apologize if this is a very depressing message, but I really don't want it to be. I want it to be one of hope. I want it to be one of, it's not the end. You have hope. You really do. And you could reach out to anyone. You could reach out to me, reach out to a family, reach out to a friend. Just do it. It's not too late. You're not too far gone. You're none of those things. And, I don't know what that means coming from me, but it might mean something to you. And you might have needed to hear that today. And, I hope I said what needed to be said. I'm sure it could have been said better. I'm sure I could have came off a lot smoother. I don't know. But this is just a reality. And, it really has a devastating impact on your life and the life of the people around you. So if you're there, if you're in rock bottom, it's all right. Reach out. Help pull you up. We can create a support system for you. Even if you talk to me, I could do everything I can to help you. And that's really all I got for you. Rest in peace Chester Bennington, and send my condolences out to his family and his children. It's a very difficult time for them, I'm sure. So Chester, thank you for the great music you've made. Thank you for being there for me. I wish I could have been there for you. But your music changed me. It impacted my life, and it impacted the life of many people I've known. You've left a legacy, and you'll always be remembered. But that's all I got for episode number 4 of The Nick Johnson Show. You can find me at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Nick Johnson CT, YouTube, The Nick Johnson Show for the video experience, and SoundCloud, The Nick Johnson Podcast for the audio experience. I'll talk to you soon.